everyone. Welcome to Textiles and Tea with the Handweavers Guild of America. I'm Kathy Group. I'm the Advertising and Marketing Manager for HGA, and I am your host today. Today's episode of Textiles and Tea is sponsored by Complex Weavers. Complex Weavers encouraging curiosity, exploration, and innovation. And also the producers of Complexity, an exhibit that will be this summer at Convergence. You'll see it there. Go see more about entering the exhibit at complex-weavers.org. We will take questions today, as we always do, the last 15 minutes. If you would, please put your questions in the Q&A. We love your comments if you want to put those in chat, but please put your questions in the Q&A. Today, we have Molly McLaughlin. Molly is a fiber artist who lives on the New Hampshire seacoast. Her work focuses on transforming the dynamic interplay of color and light found in nature into vibrant and beautiful designs. Molly's artwork is created by combining a variety of weaving and dyeing techniques, and she utilizes these to produce harmonious colors and bold compositions. While she was visiting a large fiber market in 1992, Molly fell in love with all things fiber. Her passion for the medium led her to start a 30-year journey toward developing weaving and dyeing skills that allow her to fully express her visual imagery. Molly firmly believes that as an artistic medium, weaving is versatile enough to create anything if you can see it clearly enough in your mind. Molly's fiber work has been exhibited in shows across the US and has won many awards, including the Diane Fabeck Best in Show Award for Complexity in 2018 and the Cambridge Arts Association Artist of the Year Award in 2019. Welcome, Molly. It's great to have you here.
Hi, Kathy. Thank you. And I'd like to say thank you to Karen Donde, Marge Pye, and Complex Weavers for sponsoring me. It was really nice of them, and to give a call out to everybody.
So sorry.
No, it's okay. It's great. The laptop and not you falling.
This has never happened. I've always been able to brag that I've never messed this up, and now. Okay.
I'd like to recommend that everybody submit to Complexity Innovations in Weaving in 2021. It's a wonderful show.
I apologize to Complex Weaver for interrupting that. And it's true, their exhibit will be during the same time that Convergence is going on in Knoxville. And if you want to see some incredible weaving, be sure you go see that if you're there in July. But also now's the time to enter the competition to get in. So take a look at Complex Weavers.
Thank you.
And we do appreciate them sponsoring. First of all, what is your favorite tea?
Well, right now I'm drinking a mix of Yorkshire Red, Salada Peach, 3 cardamom seeds, and a whole bunch of maple syrup.
Oh, yeah.
But that will probably change in about a week when my son's partner comes down and starts making chai in the house.
Oh, I love chai. I love chai. That's wonderful. So your first question is, how did you get started in fiber? I talked some about it at the introduction, but can you share more about that?
In my 20s, I had really wanted to become a painter. I sort of fell in love with the idea of being a painter, did a bunch of exhibits, and eventually realized that I was more in love with the idea of being an artist than actually doing the work to be an artist. But painting didn't do it for me. It wasn't tactile enough. It gave me the colors, but it didn't really do it. So as you said in your wonderful intro, a couple of years after I stopped painting, I was with a friend in California, and we wandered into this huge fiber place. I mean, floor to ceiling, shelves, they were packed with cones of so many colors. And at that point, I kind of lost my mind. And I started filling this cart with cones of colors just to buy. I didn't know what I was going to do with them. I knew how to knit, but this wasn't really yarn. I came home with this huge credit card bill and all of these cones. And my then husband, who became my ex, was horrified. That was a sign. And I started trying to figure out what I really wanted to work with these colors. So I got on, got out, well, back then we didn't have the web, but the yellow pages, and found a woman who came from Germany, who'd been trained in Germany as a production weaver and had a studio relatively near me where she gave classes. So I took a class, and then she had something she called an apprenticeship, which meant that for a year I got to sweep floors and work a lot of looms in exchange for time on a loom. And that, I was not happy during that, and it was a very rigid approach, but it turned out that it stood me in very good stead. If you're going to weave or use weaving as your medium, learning how to warp a loom, and not just how to warp with one fiber, but understanding how to get tension across a warp, what different threads need, how to actually do that. And not just with one way, but to achieve that appropriate tension for that fiber on the warp is pretty much the most important thing you can do. Mm-hmm. And that started me. It gave me a very good basis.
That's wonderful. Well, I think it's interesting you talked about how you want to be a painter first, and we'll talk more about this, but your work's so painterly. That strikes me when I see your work. It looks like it could have been a painting in a former life and came back. So how did you get involved in dyeing? Where did that come in?
Well, so color is very, very important to me. As I moved into fine threads, very fine threads, it became much harder to find threads that had the colors that I wanted, or a range of colors. I prefer to, I don't just, I started out using fiber reactive dyes or other synthetic dyes that were stronger. And I got very excited about it. I took a lot of classes, started working towards certifications, and then realized that my husband and I are fairly environmentally minded, and realized that I was using a lot of chemicals that I felt uncomfortable disposing. We've just moved, but at that point we lived right near the ocean, and I was using these chemicals that were not good for the environment around us. So I made a switch over to natural dyes, and I work at this point exclusively with plants that I grow myself and the dyes that I get from them, which is challenging, but it's very rewarding.
Well, we have some lovely pictures of your dye garden, and I understand that you started switching as you were talking about how you started switching. So here's some lovely pictures of your dye garden.
Oh, thank you.
Can you say more about how hard of a time was it to switch? Because I know some people are like, I don't like the colors, or it's too labor intensive, or.
Well, for me, it gives me a deeper connection to my work. In the same way, I suspect that somebody who spins feels a deeper connection when they're working with fiber that they've created. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to maintain life, trying to work as a fiber artist or weaver, with fiber, it's not always an easy life. And so you really need a good relationship, deep relationship with your work to carry you through times like pandemic, where the galleries close and shows shut down. You really need to have a very good relationship with your work. The dyeing helps connect on a deeper level. I started little by little. I started with indigo plants, and then I took a workshop with John Marshall and got some indigo plants from him, and then I added woad, which actually grows much better in our environment. And then I started branching out into black-eyed Susans, and then I started foraging and using acorns and walnuts and lichen. And each year I add a little bit more. I save my seeds. There's some strains. I just added a new strain of indigo also, so now I grow two different. There's some strains I've had for many years. I know my plants well, and then we've just moved. So my wonderful husband rented a separate van so that I could dig up plants and put them in big pots and move them with us.
Oh, that's great.
And I had to, harvest a huge number of seeds because I need to try to recreate it. But because the soil conditions will be different, my colors will be a little different. Oh, and I grow madder also. That's the other dye plant that I grow.
I was going to ask you about that because that's the roots, right? You get the color from the roots.
Yes,
so.
and you have to, that's a long-term investment. You want to wait several years before you harvest them to get a really good color.
Will your environment be much different from, you said that the soil will impact it, but is it colder or warmer where you're moving?
It's a little warmer, but it's we've moved way inland, and so it's the soil where we are is a lot rockier. We actually had to dig through a ledge to get our foundation in, which we just finished. It's going to be more tannin rich soil as opposed to the seacoast, which is much sandier. So it's just we'll see. I'm going to build the soil up myself from scratch, and we'll see what happens.
Well, a lot of the artists have talked about COVID. How did COVID impact your work?
That's been a big game changer for me. In 2020, the beginning of 2020, I was pretty much flying high. I mean, I was pursuing a lot of opportunities that had sort of blessedly come up for me. Gallery representation, that my work was being shown. Life was looking pretty good. And then everything shut down, and the gallery shut down, and the shows stopped happening. And I mean, this is pretty much across the board. And at that point, I, like everybody else, my life was sort of turned upside down. So before COVID, most of my designs for my work were abstract. They were based on sort of, so the design on the left side of the screen is moments. And I'm very ADHD, and I don't mean that in passing. I mean truly diagnosed ADHD. So I tend to experience time sort of in a fragmented fashion of moments. And so that piece I designed actually in the hotel room after Convergence Complexity in, I think, 2016 at night, after trying to work through things. So it's a good example of before COVID, most of my designs were abstract, trying to communicate vaguer things that I was experiencing, such as trying to cope with the conference with being really ADHD and how that worked. After COVID and life got turned around, I found that, and none of this is conscious, I sort of realized this after the fact, that my designs had gone from being very abstract to being very representational of small things in the world around me. Either my dogs on the right there, or flowers, or birds, things that as I was walking around the neighborhood, or, we're isolating at that point, so walking down paths where other people weren't, and I would see things, moments that gave me peace, and I'd really want to grab onto those and share them. And so I would take pictures and go back, and they'd go into Photoshop, and then that's when my design process starts. And through that year, I had one very long warp that I dyed with my indigo, one very long warp that I dyed with my woad. The dog photo there was the woad. And I wove these moments, and it was a very grounding experience. Then when things loosened up, things sort of shifted. The dogs are a little bit representation that I'm not fully abstract yet, but it's still representational, but a little looser around it. And as we lock down, or as it gets serious again, I may end up doing, flowers again. We'll see.
So did the representational somehow did make you feel more connected to
Yeah,
other
I think it
people?
was grounding. It was, something I could grab onto and see, and it made me feel very grounded in my environment and my world. And that was very comforting. It also, at that point, there's an English artist named Alice Fox, who almost all of her work is done out of materials she forges out of her allotment, her natural stuff, and she's wonderful. And it really made me begin to, well, I'm here, I'm not going abroad at this point, so let's see what my little space on this planet has to offer. And it turned out to be a very good approach. Now I'm looking at where this new space has to offer.
I like that space concept. I hadn't thought of it that way, but it kind of does change where you are in the world. You do have your little more of a little space. Well, your work, you use a lot of linen, right?
I'm starting to use linen. I had been fairly silk based.
Can you talk about that transition for you? Why is that? Or?
Well, I still love silk. Susan at Trainway Silks, I still, don't get me wrong, I have nothing against silk. Part of it is it's harder to get the silk that at weights that I use 262 silk and 242 silk. And I only use silk when it comes on a cone. So it's just getting harder to get that. And then also the linen, as I move toward more plant-based things, looking at more local and sustainable, the linen falls in with that. So I'm actually winding a linen or measuring it out now to get it ready to dye. At the same time, I'm also emptying out my stash. I decided that I really need to get rid of, I have this huge novelty yarn stash of, not suitable for warp. So I have to try to warp it. Nylon-based threads that are not sustainable, not eco-friendly, but I'm clearing out that stash and weaving that at the same time. So I'm a little all over the place.
Variety, that's important.
Yeah.
Well, would you describe yourself as a draftsman or an artist?
I'm not sure I would describe myself really as either.
Okay.
I think, it was when we went into COVID, I was definitely more doing things more in the sort of, if you look at it as little circles, there's the craft circle, there's the artisan circle, there's the art circle. I was doing more in the art circle. What I found is everything, when it shut down, it didn't matter in some ways to me. I just put my head down and kept weaving. And I sort of realized that what I am is a weaver. And on a really good, and that stands on a long tradition of other weavers behind me. And on a really good day, what I produce, my best work, can sometimes be accepted as art. And if I'm really good, the craftsmanship, the technique I put into it gives respect to that craft.
Mm-hmm.
But it makes it much easier if I'm just a weaver, and I happen, and then the problem is when I produce something, I have to figure out what circle I'm going to try to sell it in. but it's a lot easier if I don't put those names on myself. It changes how I feel like I need to work or design or, view my work.
Do you feel like other people try to put those names on you, on titles on you?
Oh, no. I mean, I think more at this point, even though fiber is at this much more accepted in all spheres, which is sort of the beauty of it. I still think people are confused enough by it that they don't really know what titles to put on things. And there's a lot of worry that they're going to put the wrong title on it. So So maybe they're just not going to put a title. Fiber artist seems to make everybody happy. I really, and the other thing I think that's important to be aware of, just from a practical level, is that as things have changed in the art world and the gallery world, and galleries and shows have started opening again. I started beginning the process of submitting some this fall, and I'm sort of, like many people, filling it out. But it's changed. There's a lot more online. The way things are being viewed, it's different. And like, we don't know how this pandemic's going to end. We don't know necessarily how those things are going to play out on the other side of this. So all we can really do is put our heads down and keep working and keep trying to find opportunities that will adapt and work through this. It's a big challenge.
It is. And it's amazing how much it impacts everyone equally but differently, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I want to talk some about your website. Your website is called Threading Gossamer, which I think is so appropriate because so many of your works have these fine, airy feel to them, and in your artwork. Did you always use the finer threads? Like a while ago, you were saying like 260s over 2.
No, I've been weaving almost 30 years now, and for a lot of it, I primarily wove rugs and blankets. And I thought of what I did solely as craft. I didn't see it in any way in terms of art. And it was a big sort of mental leap of, oh, maybe this is possible. And it was very fulfilling for a long time to make things that people liked and could use. And also just to offset what I do now, which can, with the very fine threads and things that are a little more complicated, I still weave rugs. I use a big twining loom and I dye my wool for that. And, I still weave rugs. It's sort of like a hobby. It's very grounding. Mm. But yeah, for a long time, it was very large threads. And then when I decided that I wanted to make more representation, or make gallery pieces or art of some sort, I realized that I wanted finer thread to give me more detail. If you have a wide warp and and heavy threads, and you're trying to create something with a lot of detail, it's very hard because you have big blotches of weft. So the really fine threads allowed me to get a lot more nuance to what I was doing. And that was good, but it was a learning curve. It was a big learning curve.
What were some of the biggest things you had to learn? What was the biggest shift?
Fine threads break. They break a lot. So there's that. Again, I was really, really lucky that I had a very solid background in warping a loom, and that helped. So I had good habits and a good understanding of even tension. It's a lot harder to get even tension when you're working with EPIs of anywhere from, say, 100 to 360. So at that point, you really have to have an understanding that the loom is not the end all. The loom's only role is to hold the warp, and you're responsible for making that warp or creating a warp that will work. And that was learning to do that wider and wider with those very fine threads just took a lot of time and patience. The other thing is I weave a lot, and I actually, over the last few years, decided that I was taking weekends off. But if you're going to really try to do something with fiber to create and sell it in any way, you need to work a lot. And so I'm at the loom 6 hours a day, 5 days a week. And in the morning, I'm either dyeing or I'm, you know, dealing with paperwork, or because the other piece of this is if you're going to try to enter shows or get gallery representation, you need a lot of ducks lined up in a row. You need to have your pieces photographed. You need an artist statement. You need a CV. You need a bio. You need headshots. You need to be able to, there's a business aspect to it. And it takes some discipline to keep those things in place. You need to have, I mean, I have the website, but my main social media is my Instagram account. And, you know, it takes some discipline to do that. And so that my morning hours are for that, but it's, you know, I put in those hours and you really need to have that discipline to show up and do it. Weaving a couple times a week, it makes it much tougher.
Going back to what you just said, I love that statement about it's not the loom, that are you focused less on the loom? Can you say more about that? I think about teaching weavers, and I feel like we really focus a lot on getting them to understand the loom and what it does. But that's an interesting way of looking at it.
I mean, I think you need to know your equipment. You need to be able to take it apart, put it back together. I mean, you need to know the looms you're working with inside out. That being said, my stepson went to Ethiopia a few years back he was working there. And he brought me back some prayer shawls, and he took a video of this gentleman weaving the prayer shawls. And the gentleman is outside. He's on this rickety loom that's built from twigs. The warp is stretched way out and around this tree, and with a stake in the ground. And he's weaving lovely things. And I can't understand how he's doing it. You know, we tend, I think, in some of the Western weaving traditions to focus very much on production and weaving fast and efficiently. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. That is really, really important. However, with that, sometimes we start focusing on the tools, using the tools to do our job. So people want to always use, and they have their place, but people want to always use a temple for straight selvages, or they want other tricks to get straight selvages, or they want, you know, they want tricks or ways of warping or whatever that will compensate for actually having the tactile skills to create that yourself. And if you have those tactile skills, you should be able to sit in this gentleman's yard and weave a beautiful prayer shawl, you know, on this like couple of sticks. It's been done. It's done. There are people who, you know, thousands of years ago were weaving beautiful things with incredibly fine silk, and their looms were, you know, not what we're really spoiled. So it's, I mean, I think focusing on the looms is fun, but it's not going to get the job done.
Right, right.
Yeah.
How do you do, a lot of people love hearing about this. How do you design? Do you draw it out? Are you on a computer? Do you sample first? How do you do your design?
It depends. Some of my designs I draw first, and then I put it into Photoshop. Other ones I take photos and I put it into Photoshop. This was from Fireflies and Jellyfish, and this was originally, I was very struck by the rocks I would find around the beach and their sort of timelessness and depth that I would see in them, and you know, they'd get wet from the tide coming in and they look very different. They're just really amazing, and you see these sort of layers in them of color and shape and light. So I had a picture and I put that into Photoshop, and I will spend a really long time manipulating and cropping and working the colors until a design resonates with me. And that can take a couple of months. I mean, I work on it, I'll put it aside, I'll come back to it, I'll work on it. And the way I work is I usually try to have, I design the length of my warps for the set pieces. I don't work unless I have a design for a piece.
Mm.
Well, I usually don't. There's a couple exceptions. But usually I have my pieces designed, the warp is measured to accommodate them. And then I go from there. So the design part is everything for me rides on that design working and being good. And I tend to stick to it very closely, but it takes a really long time. And I'm always designing, and I'd say about 80% of those designs never go anywhere. After I come back to them, they just don't hold my attention anymore.
Uh-huh. So when you're designing, does the color come in right away? Do you kind of decide that later? Both the drawing, I mean, the design and the color are balanced for you, or?
Well, that's interesting. I guess I don't really think of it that way.
Uh-huh.
It's usually, when I visualize very strongly in color.
Uh-huh.
And what I'm trying to get on, if I take a picture of something, it's because I've seen the entirety of it in color and I want to capture that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I have something in my head that I want to do with it. So the photo is sort of a reminder of what it prompted in my head. And now I have to get it to that point. But the color and the line are sort of like skin and bone. You don't have one without the other to make a complete person. They have to support each other. That doesn't mean that I change both, but if they don't, it's an equal, they can't be separated. They have to be singing in harmony. So, they work together for me. That being said too, I'm very conscious about what I do. I mean, I look at a design and I do things like, is there a line here that I work to engage the person's visual interest. Is there a line that the person's eye, my viewer's eye is going to follow? What area do I want to highlight? How am I going to do that with color? Or line or value? What tools do I have when I'm designing to communicate and draw the viewer's eye to where I want? What visual experience do I want to create with this piece? And I use those things very consciously. I think if you're trying to communicate an experience or share it, you have a responsibility to create a roadmap for the person.
We have some photos of your old studio space, and since you've moved recently, what does the studio say about you, and how are you handling, because you've really downsized, right? You're in those
but I will be upsizing. We are building.
Hey!
This studio on the screen I actually designed very specifically for myself. And that wonderful dog on the screen is Nico, and he passed away a couple months ago, which was heartbreaking. So yeah, that studio was very much, we gutted the attic and renovated it, and I had a wonderful contractor, and it was a space that I could go up into that was completely about my work. When we started the process of building the house, we didn't plan, it won't be ready until a year from now. We didn't plan to move until then. And out of the blue, we got an offer on our house when it wasn't on the market. And it was a very good offer. And at the same time, this apartment space near where we're building the house came open that took dogs and had extra room I could sort of work as a studio. So we decided to take advantage and make the move. And it meant that I had to pack away about half of my studio belongings. So I had to really decide, like my library and my books, what was important, what can I not live with, because everything else is going into storage. And the way it's packed in storage, if I pull out a box, everything's coming down. it's going to stay in storage. It's been, and I'm sort of squeezed, excuse me, I'm squeezed into this small space. And I mean, I am very, you probably can't see, but I'm really packed in here. I have two very large looms. And the way they are, I can slide the bench from front of one just right over to the front of the other. They're almost colliding, and I have no space for a table loom. It's tight, but I can weave here. So I'm lucky.
Well, let me ask you this. This is for everybody out there who wants to design their space for someday. What have you learned? Because it's basically you've designed two different spaces, the one you just moved out of and the one you're kind of going into. So what are some of the key things that you've learned about having a good weaving space for you, especially, that maybe you could share with other people and say?
Lighting is key, especially if you have overhead flood lighting. You need to have them close enough together that you don't have the pools of light overlap, so you don't have shadows between them in the loom.
Okay.
If you're weaving fine threads, those shadows make life very difficult. I think it's really, for me, I was very conscious of having white walls, neutral floors. You don't want things that are going to affect the color. You're going to have enough of that with the lights. There's a huge difference that you can get between taking, especially if you're working in silk or other highly reflective materials. If you take something from one light source and bring it to another, you can get a really big surprise about your work and look really different. So you want to be aware and make at least conscious choices and understand what the lighting is doing to your work. And then I'm an extremely messy weaver. Like, I just cut things off and throw it on the floor. I mean, I am very messy. So I needed a floor that would clean really easily. And then you need a space that really speaks to you. I mean, I think there's something to be said that if you're at a point where you're trying to design and create a piece and then sell it, you need to have a space where you can feel very comfortable being you, so that you don't feel pressure to design things that look a certain way or choose structures that everybody else is doing, or judge your work because it looks different, so maybe it's not good. You have to have a place that supports you as you are, so that when you're weaving something on the loom, when we weave, it's challenging because you only see a little bit at a time. And no piece ever looks good in its first 4 inches. It just doesn't, So if you're not in an environment that you feel supported, you may very well cut it off or give up on it, or just never give it the attention and love it needs to really blossom. And I think if you have the opportunity to create your own space, it's wonderful to fill it with cards or things that make you feel comfortable and confident in what you're doing and who you are as an artist.
Well, I feel your pain, because people who've watched know that this is a different background, because we've moved and we did the same thing. There's things got packed up, and I hope I see them again someday, but not yet. But I was curious, when I was packing, there were certain things like, I don't really need this in my room, but I want it. Did you have things like that were like, this is coming no matter what, other than the loom itself and that kind of thing?
Yes, the looms were coming no matter what. And there's actually, I posted a video to my Instagram page. When we were doing it, 2 of the movers almost quit. moving, the looms break down completely. I mean, one is this big beast behind me is an oxaback Ulysses, and it breaks down completely. And the other nihilist does, but the winding staircase to get up into this loom room, they didn't think they were going to make it. They finally did. And that was almost it for them. But the looms were going to come. And the hardest thing for me was the books. I really like reference books, especially for dyeing.
Yeah.
So I had to choose the ones that I couldn't. And then there were some books that I don't really ever look at, but I like to have around. I like to have Peter Collingswood's books on rug weaving. They feel like old friends. I haven't looked at them in years, but I like to have them there.
Mm-hmm.
There's some reference books like that I don't really need anymore, but they're part of who I am, so they needed to come. There's certain shuttles and things that are old friends at this point. They may not be the best shuttles, they may not even work really well, but those were coming. So yeah, it really boiled down to who were my tools. Mm-hmm. And I think I probably left some surprising things behind. The big challenge now is to not go out to decide, well, I really need this. I have to go out and try to replace the stuff in storage. So not having space helps. But yeah, it's hard. And my husband's a saint because the overflow is in the living room space, and my big wide format printer is in the dining room space. And it's tough right now.
Well, what's next for you? Are you more exhibits, teaching, changing what you're weaving?
Yeah, I'm not really that interested in teaching at this point. I've taught some in the past. What I find is that the teaching makes it very hard to do my own work. I have incredible respect for the teachers out there. And some have been a huge influence on me, and I'm very grateful for them, but I can't do my own work. I've started the process of submitting to shows again. But I'm having a little bit of trouble getting too excited about it like I used to be. Somewhere it's sort of like I'm in hibernation and I'm trying to get myself going. My ideal situation, what I had been actually looking like it might happen, is to have representation with a single gallery, and then I can just do my work and put it in the gallery and be happy, and occasionally submit to shows. We'll see how that plays out. I'm like that rabbit that came out and is stretching and trying to figure out what I'm doing. And I'm still, I never ever want my work to stop changing. I'm pretty clear about what kind of weaving I do. I do inlay, and but I don't ever. I want that to always be growing and changing. And part of that, to do that, I need to have feedback from other artists of all kinds. There's a wonderful artist, a painter who I had the opportunity to meet and get to know a little lately, Laura Chasman, who has this wonderful style of painting that's very relaxed. And it made me look at my own work and realize that I felt that the images were static and frozen. So I started devising ways of using the inlay that's looser and allows for more movement and a crossover of threads and more life in the images. And I'm still playing around with that. But if you going out and seeing what other people are doing, it breathes. And I don't mean just other weavers or other fiber artists, but other people who are doing creative things. It can really breathe life and feed you, which is something that's been tough during the last couple of years.
Yeah. I bet. Well, let's take some questions from the audience. We have a lot of questions. Dorothy Miller, do you have any tips for those of us who want to get into warp dyeing? Any particular resources you would recommend?
Well, I'm really not good with names. First of all, I would really recommend picking up the book, The Art and Science of Natural Dyes, Catherine Ellis, and I can't remember the other woman who wrote it, but it's absolutely wonderful. If you're at all interested in natural dye, that is must have. And I hope you can help me out. The website is Blazing Shuttles, and I'm
Catherine Weber.
Catherine Weber.
Yeah.
She definitely teaches wonderful warp painting classes. Sydney Sogel's Instagram page, and following her, she paints all of her own warps. She's extraordinary. All of those things you can gather information, but the big thing is to create a warp, not a big one. Go ahead and create it. If you want to do indigo, find somebody to walk you through creating an indigo vat and just do it. And let yourself mess up. Let yourself, don't do huge complex warps, just do small ones. And you're going to learn by doing it and have fun with it and let yourself fall in love with it.
We got a shout out here. This is from Jill Hunter. She
Hi,
says,
Jill.
hello from Jill and everyone at Weavers East. We miss you and wish you all the best here in Western Mass. So
I miss them too. They were a wonderful group that when I lived in New Hampshire for years supported me through my trials and tribulations, and they're just extraordinary group of weavers.
Well, this is from Ruth McGregor. Molly, it's exciting to see and hear the evolution of your work. I see you're still working with very fine threads. We kind of talked some about that. Is the loom behind you the one you use in weaving your beautiful, remarkably fine hangings? Yeah, do you do different looms for different size threads?
Well, I have two looms that I use. This big beast behind me here, I call this Grendel. And Grendel's what I use for the very fine silk and the linen. When I'm weaving, I also do a little weaving with like 40 gauge copper warps, very, very fine copper warps. And then the novelty, not suitable for warp threads that I'm using. I have an old, heavy, giant nylus loom with a worn out friction brake. And it turns out that worn out friction brake actually is perfect for those fibers, because it gives just a little bit of give. Each time I beat, just a little bit of give, so the fibers last, they don't break. But yeah,
that's great.
The Ula Cyrus is my big fine thread. Yeah, Grendel is my baby.
Kathy Roy, speaking of painting warps, Kathy Roy, I've seen some of your work on Instagram using wire threads.
That's what I was.
Yeah, can you talk some about how you came to use wire? Is it wire or thread? I've seen in your photos.
Okay, so my warps are generally the very, very fine silk or linen. And one of the things when I first started working with them is those pieces had no substance to them. So I started using, for the ground weft, very, very fine, like I said, 40 gauge. It's like hair thickness, copper or nickelback. And first of all, it increases the reflectivity. So it makes it very, it's pretty, but it also gives structure to these very fine threads. And then I started playing around with using them for warp. Like, can I actually use create warps with this? So I've done a few projects moving wider and wider, and that's when I started using the nylus and realizing that worked really well for them. It's a lot of fun. I definitely, using the nickelback or stainless steel is harder to work with because it will kink and then it will slice through the threads. The copper doesn't seem to do that as much. So if you're starting, I recommend the copper. But you can also get the copper coated in green. And this is the wire they wrap around batteries. So you have to sort of hunt for it. You can find it in Temco or a couple other places. But they give a different effect, the underlying, using it as a warp, it gives a different cast to the piece. So I completely recommend it. I think it's just really fun to work with.
This is from Pam Chumbley. Using natural dyes, how do you protect your piece from fading in natural or artificial light?
That's the biggest challenge with natural dyes. So the dyes that I use, I usually, weaving those rugs on the twining loom helps. And so the process that I've sort of developed is I'll dye a bunch over the summer, and then those wool, when I'm trying new things in wool, and then it sits for like a year before I actually use it. So that gives me an idea of how color fast that it will be. And then I'll try that approach in other threads. But I also have an approach. I do two things that primarily helps guard against the color fast. And again, it's tough. There may be some fading, and it's hard to tell until you've had a piece for a number of years out. That being said, I have fiber reactive dyed pieces that also have some fading. So, there's always going to be some if something is kept in direct light. The two things that I do is, for natural dyeing, you need patience. Most of my dye work simmers for a couple of days. It'll simmer during the day, sit overnight, simmer during the day, sit overnight. And I'll do that for quite a few days. And never go above a certain temperature, because you don't want to break the dye molecules. I keep the heat steady, low, turn it off at night, bring it back up. And I have a good idea at this point what concentration I need, but it's almost always a higher concentration of dye material than people expect they're going to need. So that helps. I find that letting things go much longer and being patient about it really, really helps how color fast they are. And then I use soy milk. So the soy milk afterwards, I don't use soy milk on wool. But I do use soy milk on silk and linen and cotton when I've done it. But the linen warp I'm winding now is going to be dipped in an indigo henna vat. Then I'll use alum, and then I'll use weld, and then I will dip the whole thing in soy. And the soy does a couple things. One, it works as a binder. So the loose particles that you still have that haven't been rinsed out, but that might get knocked off or thread, they get glued to the fiber, they bind to it. And it also goes a long way toward protecting against sunlight and sun fading. It will protect the fibers. And I've had a lot of luck with that. And often after I dip, I'll still paint again with soy milk when it's on the loom, and go, so that it gets well covered. That's as far as I've gotten. And it seems to be working. And also, if I have a plant like my black-eyed Susans, the flowers give green, but it's not a great color fast green, but the leaves give yellow. And that's actually, it's black-eyed, it's the Herda variety. The black-eyed leaf, or the leaves of the black-eyed Susan, give a decent mustard yellow that's actually pretty color fast.
So it sounds like a lot of it is just you've just experienced and you've come to know.
Right.
Huh. All right. Well, Susan Lawley says, what weave structure do you primarily use?
I use variations of theomorphic. Well, for the rugs on the twining loom, I use variations of basic twining, which become braiding in different strands. But for my wall pieces, they're variations of theomorphic. And so there's a basic structure for it, but I'll often double that structure. So, it's 2 in shaft 1, 2 in shaft 2, or, right side by side, or I'll put the tie down threads instead of like 2 apart, they're 1 apart, depending on how much detail I want to have. and adapting, and mainly that lets me adapt for the EPI of the piece, the ends per inch of the piece.
Sue Sari, hi Sue. As you create your natural dye, this is a great question. Are you at the mercy of the season's growth cycle?
Oh, very much.
Do you dye in batches or do you store your dye liquid? I'm thinking she's saying, liquor? Come on. And dye your materials that you prepare for a project in the future. So do you just dye what's kind of like farm to table? You eat what's current and there, or are you able to store some things so to use them later?
Okay, so because I have sort of two branches to what I do. The seasons are very problematic and wonderful. It puts a routine in your life. I know, and again, this will switch when my plants are in a different soil and different sun, but where they were, I knew the times of the growth cycle that I would get the best indigo or the best color from my woad. I had those things and I knew that if I was going to dye with them, I was going to dye then. So the trick for me becomes that it's not just the dyeing, but I have to plan my designs and my warps and when I'm going to have the warps ready to measure out and dye according to those cycles. So I have to be designing like I'm a little off now, but my standard is warp that will hold between 3 and 4 pieces with 6 inches between each. I cut off and I tie on and I go to the next. I figure, and then I design, as I'm designing, I need to figure out, okay, what is the background color going to be? And that will decide whether I use a woad warp or indigo warp or madder warp. And then if I'm changing colors, I will use soy milk and pigment to paint as I go on each piece. But I have to have those warps measured out, the pieces designed within certain time frames, and then I weave throughout the winter for that. This year got a little messed up.
You're so organized. I love it.
Really. I have it's over there. I have indigo warp silk that hasn't been put on, and this year got all messed up. Hopefully next year I'll be back. So,
well, Dorothy Miller has another interesting question. How do you get the clean line and edges in your pictorial work? Like the one with the dogs. Is there an Econ component to your work?
No, that has to do with the fine threads. So if you have a higher EPI, ends, if you have more ends per inch and the tie down threads are closer together, it means that those little jagged edges that happen are much smaller because the distance between the tie down threads is much smaller. So this creates, you still have that jagged edge that you might normally have, but it creates an illusion of smoothness because it's so much closer together. And it's really like looking at something if you blow up something on your computer screen really big, you see that grid, but when you step out, the fine threads just gives you that. And then also you need to have a technique that you need to have a technique where you can create those shapes in your weaving, just like tapestry, where you learn to weave different shapes and create them. You need to learn to do that with the inlay.
Oh, okay. Well, I cannot believe it's time to quit for today. I just thank you so much for sharing your work and your creativity, and we could talk for hours.
I do want to say that next week you are interviewing Melanie Old, and I am just a huge fan. I encourage everybody to tune in. She's got to be one of the most innovative weavers I know of, and I'm really excited to see it. So I wanted to give a shout out for that.
You're nice. You're so nice.
It's great. I'm looking forward to it. I had a blast. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to Complexity.
Thank you. if you want to learn more about our work, somebody was asking about wanting to see more images. I know we could look for days. I would encourage you go to threadinggossamers.com.
Or Molly McLaughlin's fiber art on Instagram. That's really where that's, if you want to find out about what I do, that's the spot. So,
all right. Yes. Go and see all of her beautiful images. You can see more about her work. And again, it's just incredible work. Go check it out. I hope we'll see you at Convergence this summer.
I am going to run up to you and give you a huge hug.
Well, I hope we see your work. I hope you'll be in the exhibit, which was our sponsor, Complex Weavers, and they are producing the exhibit Complexity 2022, Innovations in Weaving. The entry deadline is February 15th of 2022. I hope you all will enter. We hope we'll see some of your work, Molly. Again, that you repeatedly win when you are in there. That would be great. A little competition there.
I definitely do. Lots of competition.
Thank you again. I do want to thank the sponsors, Complex Weavers, for hosting this or sponsoring this today. If you would like to sponsor Textiles and Tea, please go online and you can get all the information that you need at weavespindye.org. We also want to thank some of our support comes from the Fiber Trust. And we want to thank everybody who's been donating to the Fiber Trust from Giving Tuesday on, because the HGA's programs such as Shuttle Spindle and Die Pod, our magazine, Certificate of Excellence, which many of you have participated in, and even this, Textiles and Tea, these are not covered by your membership or completely by sponsorship fees. So your donations to HGA's Fiber Trust helps these programs and many more, such as grants and scholarships, and our wonderful Convergence interns that I hope you'll meet this summer when you come to Knoxville. So the income that Convergence, the conference of Convergence itself provides HGA gets us through 2 years. So postponing Convergence from 2020 to 2022 really was a financial hit for HGA. And so many of you have just stepped up and helped us out so much to keep this organization running. And we appreciate that. We hope that you will help us make our goal this year, help us make up for all that income that we've lost from Convergence, and that just a reminder that you can donate $300 and this year, that I think that rule has changed, and $600 if you are filing jointly. So we appreciate all you who've donated. Again, it's toward the end of the year. If you're still thinking about how you want to support your favorite nonprofit, I hope you'll keep HGA in mind and donate to the Fiber Trust. We really do appreciate it. Next week, we are very excited. Who are we going to have? We're going to have Molly's best friend, Melanie Old. Her work is amazing. I hope you will join us next week. Thank you so much for being here this afternoon. Have a great week. Oh, and just a reminder, the HGA offices will be closed starting Thursday, and they will not open again until January the 3rd. But we will have Textiles and Tea next Tuesday, and I hope you all will join us then. Have a wonderful week and happy tea.